Good afternoon, and if I look nervously towards that corner of the room, I'm expecting a signal that I'm required to vote in the House of Commons at any moment, so please don't take it wrongly if I suddenly decide to flee in the middle of my own speech. Anyway, it's a great pleasure for me to be here this afternoon, marking the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and moreover, its invaluable contribution to global trade. The association has come a very long way in the last half-century. When the declaration was signed, it was a loose bloc of 5 nations. Today, it has expanded to 10 members, deepened its commercial ties, and collectively represents the 9th largest economy on earth. It is a formidable force. Over the past 5 decades, the organization has become a lead driver of development, peace, and prosperity in the region. And thanks in part to its tireless efforts, Southeast Asia is poised to become an economic powerhouse of the 21st century. Already, ASEAN represents one of the world's fastest growing emerging markets, with annual GDP growth averaging 5% over the last decade across the whole region. These figures speak for themselves. Southeast Asia cannot be ignored as a force in global commerce. We are here today, of course, because we recognize this. The UK-ASEAN Business Council has been unstinting in its work to broaden and deepen the economic ties between Britain and the Southeast Asian nations. My Department for International Trade is also acutely aware of the importance of the ASEAN nations to the UK's future trading interest. We were founded, my department, following last year's referendum result, a recognition of the fact that for the first time in over 4 decades, the United Kingdom would be regaining an independent trade policy. Uniting all existing trade capabilities under one roof, we are a department that champions the concept of free trade, helps businesses export, drives investment, and opens up markets. These functions are part of our and our government's wider vision of a Britain that trades its way to prosperity, stability, and security. But these ambitions for our country cannot be realized without strong and fruitful trading relationships with partners around the world. If the UK is to remain a prosperous and world-leading nation into the 21st century, then it's vital that we nurture commercial partnerships with those nations, like the ASEAN countries, that will drive global growth itself. Like the UK-ASEAN Business Council, the Department for International Trade is taking action to ensure that opportunities for trade and commerce continue to grow. Just this week, my department has helped the UK and Malaysia take their partnership in the technology sector into new heights with the visit of the largest ever UK tech delegation to Malaysia to attend the UK Megatech mission. In Singapore, our science and innovation network is also partnering the public and private sectors to develop an autonomous vehicles program. And UK Export Finance, that's the UK's export credit agency, has over £20 billion in capacity to help UK exporters win, fulfill, and get paid for export contracts in the ASEAN region, and for buyers in the region to secure high-quality UK goods and services with attractive government-backed finance. During my time as Secretary of State, I've been fortunate enough to visit Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Vietnam, and I look forward to future visits to the region. And on days like this, I look forward to them even more. Each time I've been there, I have been struck by the vast appetite that exists in these countries, not only for British goods and services, but for our knowledge, our experience, and our expertise. And the opportunities are absolutely vast. And as the UK leaves the European Union and we open a new chapter in our history, they will continue to be so and to drive our future prosperity. 22% of ASEAN's total trade with the European Union is conducted with the UK. The business relationships that exist, from the most established multinationals to the newest SMEs, are incredibly important to us. Business needs continuity and stability, and that's why, as we negotiate our departure from the EU, my department is laying the groundwork to ensure that market access, including that covered by EU free trade agreements, continues uninterrupted. And this week we published our white paper on trade that sets out how we will deliver this. Our ambition is to build a truly global Britain, a country that is stable, prosperous, outward-looking, and internationalist, a country that works unhesitatingly with partners around the world to spread the benefits of international commerce, a country that is the greatest advocate of free trade anywhere in the world. We recognize that without the friendship and support of the ASEAN nations, the challenge to turn this dream into a reality will become much more formidable. So here's to another 50 years of trade, commerce, and friendship. None of us are passengers in our own destiny. We can make change happen if we want. And there is so much for us to do, and we will do it together. Thank you. I'm sure.
Time just for a couple of questions over there, sir.
Jason Feely from the University of Nottingham. Secretary of State, from your visits to the region, could you expand on that appetite for global Britain that you've seen?
I wish that when I came back to the UK, people here had the same respect for our goods and services and the quality of British collaboration that I find when I visit the ASEAN countries. When we talk about British goods and services, they are regarded very much as being at the top end of the global quality scale, which is why when people in Britain talk about leaving the EU and a race to the bottom, nothing could be further from the truth. What Britain represents in many cases is the gold standard, and that's where we have to compete in the global market. We have to understand that we are offering the best, sometimes at a premium price, but our USP is the quality of what we offer. And what I find increasingly, and especially on my last trip to the region, was a huge appetite for countries to partner with UK companies. If I take, for example, some of the contracts on the Chinese Belt and Road program, I found a huge appetite for people to partner with the UK as a sign of a quality partnership that would enable them a better chance of receiving a contract. And we in the UK need to recognise that we offer a wonderfully complementary ability to partner with many companies in the ASEAN region to enable both of us to gain market access that we might not otherwise have achieved on our own. So there's a potential for synergy, which I think is unprecedented anywhere else. And the UK is a willing and able partner in that.
One more question, I think.
Adrian Keeling from Number 5 Chambers. Would you tell us what you're doing to improve the environment for those British companies who export and deal with ASEAN?
Well, in terms of, there are two issues to that. The first is market access, and we are looking at the trade agreements that the European Union has with countries in the region that we are a party to as part of our membership of the European Union, and we're undertaking a process called transitional adoption. And to explain that, it means that we take the trade agreement that exists and we replicate that in UK law so that when we leave the European Union, there's no disruption to market access in either direction. And I'm hugely gratified by the response that we've had to that. And that ensures that we get no instability, But the reason we call it transitional adoption is that we're adopting it on the basis that we move in the future to a more bespoke and more liberal agreement even than those which we have today. So that's the big picture. The second thing is, what are we doing at a more micro level to help UK businesses? Let me give you just two examples. We, this week, introduced new access to UK finance for SMEs in the UK. Now, up to last Monday, if you were an SME in the UK and you wanted to apply for UK export finance, you had to fill in a 42-page form, and if you were lucky, you might hear back from us in 6 weeks. As of last Monday, we used new delegated powers with the 5 big banks, that they will have access to our algorithms. So when a small business goes in and asks, would they be eligible for UK export finance, they'll be told immediately yes or no, and the package can be finalized within 6 days. That is a genuine move forward for real businesses. Unlikely to find it on the front page of our national papers, but if you're a real business person trying to do business, it's a barrier removed. The other is that we're well aware of the fact that not all countries in the region share the same level of political stability. And quite often we find that companies are unwilling to try to get into markets where they're perhaps a little more difficult than others. And that is why we're introducing overseas investor insurance for political risk. And so we will cover businesses for things like government default, where there is political turmoil, or acts of terrorism, areas where they would find it very difficult to get insurance in the private sector because of the cost. And we've set aside a substantial sum in UK export finance to cover that. Again, these are very practical ways in which we can help real businesses into real markets. I'm not expecting to see the splash in any of our tabloids on this, but what I want to see is that when we look at the figures in 2, 3, 5 years' time, that we're making a genuine difference to genuine businesses on the ground. And smart policy doesn't always make headlines, but it does create prosperity. And the final thing I would say is tying both these questions, if I may, together. We don't see trade as an end in itself. We see trade as being one of the tools that will enable us to increase prosperity. And that prosperity underpins social cohesion, and that social cohesion itself underpins political stability. And we depend on that political stability for our security. And together, we have to see all these elements as a continuum that we cannot break in any one point without the whole breaking down, which is why across government we are increasing our cooperation between my department, our International Development Department, and the Foreign Office, ensuring that we've got greater cooperation to ensure that that continuum is strong to our mutual benefit. And that is the big partnership that we offer going ahead, the understanding of the linkages between those, and how this is not an exercise in philanthropy on the part of any of us, but it's our collective security, our collective stability, our collective prosperity.
Thank you, Secretary of State. And we did promise with your office we would release you. But thank you for kicking off our discussion this afternoon in such a positive way. Before you go, Secretary of State, I would like to acknowledge the incredible support we get from the ASEAN London Committee of Ambassadors, who are well represented in the front row. It is very much a partnership between the UK and ASEAN, and their presence represents that. So thank you for beginning our discussions, and we'll look forward to seeing you back in the ASEAN region before too long.
And I'd like to thank